Yeah? Does anything work now? No? Yes? Maybe?
Now working.
Now working?
Yeah, now working.
Okay. So once again, we rewind. Yeah. It's okay. It's all right, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking perhaps we would just videotape this later, but I think we can do this now. So we rewind once again. That's, as I was mentioning, that the time has been moving incredibly quickly, and at the same time seems like we are caught in some kind of vicious circle. That is, as the pandemic was easing, everyone was coming out, and now once again we are in the midst of a new surge in the world. It's this Omicron variant is, as the CDC has formulated, I should say, is definitely a variant of concern. It's a concern to all of us, and simply we don't know much about it except that it is extremely contagious. People say that it is less serious in terms of causing fatal disease for them, but anyway, we see that fatalities in the world are up. Now, the United States, of course, has officially exceeded now 800,000 deaths, and probably we are in fact over 1 million. And these deaths, of course, are not equally spaced throughout the population, but we find that 1 out of every 100 older Americans has actually perished, even though older Americans are among the most vaccinated group. People over 65 make up, wow, about 3/4 of the nation's coronavirus death toll. That's about 600,000. That's it. Now, I've read articles saying, well, these older Americans are going to die in any case. I think that I may actually be counted among this. But there are 2 points for this. First of all, the death of anyone is in fact a tragedy. And it is clear that the excess deaths due to the COVID pandemic, which have affected older Americans, are in fact excess deaths. They are easily 15 to 20% over what we would call the norm for fatalities among that age group, let's say. And what we're finding now is that among young people, we're having an increase in serious disease that way. Now, the increase in serious disease overall has a lot to do with people not being vaccinated, but that is not the entire situation. And I come here. Unfortunately I'm very scattered in terms of my notes. I was trying to put them together this morning, and I thought, oh, forget it. I'll just bear with it now, and hopefully I will do this in rather. Okay, yes. Okay, I have it, so it's not as bad. So I think. Well, there are examples which are very troubling right now in terms of the pandemic, from South Korea, also from Portugal, UK as well, and other places, other areas of the world, which in fact have higher rates of vaccination than the United States does. Now, South Korea is in the midst right now of a rather very serious surge, I would say. And on Thursday, that's I guess yesterday. I think so. Today's Friday, isn't it? Yeah. Bo Kyum-kim, the Prime Minister of South Korea, explained that they're returning to restrictions and that the country is facing a virus crisis. This is South Korea had successfully contained the virus through most of the pandemic, and it has one of the highest vaccination rates among wealthy countries. It's about 81.5% of South Korea's population, according to the site Our World in Data. And it's trailing only Portugal, Chile, and Iceland among the sort of members for which we have data. The United States has maybe 61% vaccination rate. We're not even sure if it's that high. The UK, 69%, all according to this site, World in Data. Now, still, even with 81.5% of South Korea's population vaccinated, there are serious outbreak of disease. And of course, it is centered around those who have received either no vaccine yet or have not yet received their second shots. And daily cases, though, have exceeded 7,000 a month, 7,000 a day. What am I talking about? Not a month, daily. Daily cases are daily cases, not monthly cases, not weekly cases. Okay. I wake up early for this to sort of futz around trying to get organized. And then when it comes to the actual live stream, I'm already ready to go back to sleep. Okay. Anyway, I continue. Now, as it's reported, this is a Wall Street Journal is basically reporting this. It's what my information is coming from. That they said that South Korea has never seen so many critically ill patients, and 90% of the ICU beds for COVID-19 patients are occupied in the Seoul metropolitan area. And deaths are at record levels, doubling from last month. This is according to the Wall Street Journal. And now, South Korea is not alone in this. For Portugal, where 89% of the population has gotten 2 COVID-19 shots, is actually requiring remote work beginning next month, and have instituted many restrictions, reinstituted, I should say, many restrictions, such as negative test results are needed to enter public places such as nightclubs or bars, nursing homes, even if you're vaccinated. Ireland also has a 76% is fully vaccinated, and yet is introducing curbs. The UK, as I had mentioned before, and Germany also, as Austria, although Austria is not as heavily vaccinated. That's right. Now, going back to South Korea, see, very recently, it was thought by officials that you could start a new era of just sort of living with COVID because it had such a high vaccination rate, and the country very much opened up. Businesses could stay open, et cetera, et cetera. There were no limits on the numbers of people in private gatherings. But what happened, of course, is this huge spike of infections, and South Korea is now warning that daily infections could soon surpass 10,000 and may even get considerably higher by next month. And you could have 2,000 worst case scenarios every day, at least. That's, for this country, this is very, very serious. Now, what does this mean, actually? Of course, medical science is really moving to try to combat the virus, and you already have 2 antiviral medications which do seem to be very effective in early stages of the disease. And this is the very important part, early stages of the disease. But the way I see this is that the concept of herd immunity that was been bantered around since the beginning of the pandemic, we see is in a certain sense nonsense. That you say, well, if 70% or so of the population is because become immune through vaccination or through infection, let's say, then basically the virus will die out that way. We can't find enough hosts. Now, we see that, in fact, that's not actually true. So this is a very good, and I don't say this with glee in my eyes or that thing. So this is a good test case for the theory, so-called theory of herd immunity. That, in fact, what are needed are very serious measures from something very early. Now, it is possible that if the world had been vaccinated, let's say, at a much earlier time, that the virus would not have found hosts to, and would not have, what was that? No, that's me. I thought I had undone that thing. Okay, anyway. And I lost my train of thought. That if the world had acquired immunity in a very early stage, then perhaps we would not be seeing this now. But of course, given the uneven rate of vaccination throughout the world, I think this is something that, in a certain sense, was expected. But what was not expected is that countries which are, in fact, very heavily vaccinated would still be susceptible to this disease. We have to see with booster shots, et cetera, what the result will be in that way, and hopefully that will actually be a lot. I was reading that it could easily be that, in fact, the vaccines need to have 3 doses or so, and that's to become the norm. I remember when I was little that we had shots, and then we had multiple booster shots. And somehow it was always not a problem to do that. Okay. So that I talk just a little bit more about the Omicron variant, and the most troubling aspect of that variant is, it says, the shocking speed with which it can be actually, now I'm thinking in another language, but I just had something from Russia, so I'm thinking in Russian now. How to say? This is very funny. How quickly the infection can spread, we can say that way. I think the word in Russian is much more highfalutin, colorful. So in South Africa, this is an important statistic. Every infected person has been passing the virus on to between 3 or 3.5 other people, let's say, statistically speaking. This is actually quite a lot, I have to say. If you think of that, so you have 1 person to 3 people to 9 to 27, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, and which is considerably faster than even Delta was spreading. Now, and what we do not know, apparently, is whether it is just more transmissible or that it is less responsive to vaccines than, for instance, Delta. But in any case, the problem is the rapidity of the spread. Now, what that means, though, is that it can spread before it's detected. And that is the dangerous part of Omicron. It's said that it causes less severe illness. Of course, statistics for actual severity of illness lag by several weeks. So that's something that let's hope for, I think. Then it may be here, but it may be simply not as virulent as the virus has been. Of course, the issue is also of what's called long COVID and delayed symptoms, delayed effects, I should say, not symptoms. And that is something that we can't know right at the moment for this. So let's hope that also medical science gets a sort of hold on what this Omicron is, and let's hope also that there's what is we see the beginning of, but we don't know if it's actually going to be carried out fully, is an effort to vaccinate the populations of the world which have not been vaccinated with not only the two vaccinations which were recommended, but with the three which now we see actually, in fact, does make a difference. Okay, now I'm going to switch, and I hope I'm going to be rather quick. I have so much information that it's overwhelming what I want to talk about, but I'm not going to. This is here, but when I move now to, well, I make sense. To economics, which I'm going to, and finally to global warming, which is often just called climate change. Am I speaking loudly enough?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. That's great. And I begin with a statement from a fellow by the name of Rishi Sunak, who, I'm in New York, he is in London, and he's Chancellor of the Exchequer, now which means basically you can say he's the government accountant in charge of the Treasury, in charge of taxation, et cetera, and he was talking about booster shots and how the economy is going to have trouble supporting them. So he said, booster shots, for instance, they said, do not grow on trees. They cost money. And in order to do that, maybe we will need to tax more, of course, that we will have to endure more austerity this way. And with that ridiculous statement, I move to the problems that the United States is having with what's called the Build Back Better Act, which has been pared from $3 trillion to down to 1.75 trillion or so, something of that sort. Exactly. That's and now it's Senator Joe Manchin, or Manchin. I don't quite know how to pronounce his name. I don't know if I need to know that, even. I should know it, yeah. He is once again putting his foot down and saying that he does not want, or I should say, he will not support this bill. This is after he mentioned that he will support it, and very much this bill was pared down just to satisfy him. It's amazing that one person, it's in a certain way two people, because there's also Cinema, who is a little sort of not exactly in the same camp, but also it's problematic this way. That one person can actually determine the fate of the country in some way. This is it's a discussion for later, and that has to do with what is democracy and what is also representative government. These are two what I call right now sort of buzzwords, bywords that just give kind of emotional meaning, but actually have no objective meaning anymore. Anyway, he wants to eliminate what's called the boosted child tax credit, which means that if you have children and under a certain income, that you actually get a tax credit for that. And even that in this bill is something that is not going to remain forever, but it's supposed to last just a few years. I don't bother with the details of it. No. And the problem we have is that we're right at the end of the year, and during the pandemic, in fact, this called the Child Tax Credit, or CTC, was instituted and helped many people during lockdowns and pandemic restrictions. But if this legislation is not passed by the end of this year, that will end. And of course, you'll have millions of children, I would say families, sort of sliding back into poverty. This is, now, what he is saying is that Manchin is saying that we have inflation, and this is more important, and this bill will sort of increase our government deficit and make inflation worse. All of this is total nonsense. Now and we can see this as nonsense simply because just recently our U.S. Congress passed a military spending bill. This was maybe the largest bill so far. It's a $778 billion military spending bill for the 1 year. Now, what that means, actually, if you go over 10 years with this, with what are called escalators. In other words, these are measures for inflation and for what are standard increases, et cetera, you have a bill of $12 trillion. Now, that was no problem. And we have this bill, which over the period of time, this is, let's say, 10 years, is now a meager, even though it's a trillion, $1.75 trillion, and that is what breaks the budget. It reminds me of Monty Python, the one thing where you have this fellow in the restaurant, and he's this and that, and then the waiter comes at the end and says, and at the very end, we have this little chocolate for you. And he says, oh, I could not possibly have that. I will simply explode. So he says, no, but it's just so tiny. He says, okay. And he takes this tiny chocolate, puts it in his mouth, and he explodes. I mean, this kind of mindset is what we're looking at, perhaps. But I have a feeling that this mindset is not really a mindset, but there's something else involved, which in fact is not so naive and not so concerned, in fact, about inflation or about the budget. Okay. And I'm very concerned about this because what we have, at least in this bill, is something which, in fact, will put people to work, will improve the daily life of people because it will improve infrastructure. And yet, that is in danger of, in fact, not being passed. And, okay, let me continue here. Yeah. And we're talking about inflation and the problem of, well, supply chain issues, that's what's called that we don't have, and that little by little, perhaps that is getting better, but still inflation is held longer than we think. But of course, because people are, in fact, spending money, and you still have not only do you have issues of supply, you have issues of companies, for instance, budgeting increases in prices because they're worried that there will be problems. And that is a problem of inflation as well. But we have many sort of hidden issues, and one issue is in the agricultural sector. The problem of, here, let me actually find this in a better way so I can not make a big mistake. What am I doing? Oh, I want that. Yeah. Let me see. Oh, this is the wrong one. Yeah, I will come back to it. Sorry, I have to go with this. I think it, no, I think it has to be this. Yeah, no. Ah, this one is earlier. Yeah, okay, this is what I wanted to mention. This, in the agricultural sense, it's about what's called urea, which is, stuff that in urine, in fact, but not only that. Urea is, in fact, a very important material, and the prices for this chemical, which are very, very important for agriculture, also for parts of the gasoline that is used to start, especially for trucks, for instance. And there's a big disruption in the production of urea. So, one problem of the cost of food is the cost of fertilizer, because the price of urea, because of the price of urea has gone up so much. So you see that there's kind of issues are how would you call it? Sort of cascade from one to the next to the next to the next, and finally we have higher prices for food. So a lot of this just has to be worked out. Now, what is being talked about now are very traditional ways of trying to limit or trying to reduce inflation, which is at a rather high point here. I think that we find it higher in certain areas, not as high in other areas. So that, in fact, the situation is worldwide and is more complicated than what we read about in the press. But the solutions are simply different forms of austerity, as it's called. So you raise interest rates to make everything more difficult to buy, and then people buy less. But what all of this does is simply makes people poorer. And the biggest issue that I see in this is, while the cost of certain things has risen a lot, what has also risen are business profits, which are in many cases at record heights. And you do find, as something that I detailed, I think was it in the last actual live stream that I did, which when was that? 2 years ago? I know, I can't even remember. No, I'm kidding. But this is the problem of time now. That we do have the wealthiest companies, the wealthiest and CEOs, et cetera, have made an incredible killing during this pandemic. Now, but will these companies of this reduce the level of profit or increase the price of things, of course, they will increase the price, you see. And so inflation always benefits certain segments of the population. That way. And this is the problem. So then you institute austerity, but the profits stay the same, but people suffer for that. Now, you have we are on a tipping point right now in the world, not in the world, but in the United States at least, and I think probably in the world at large, where labor and people, regular people who have jobs, can actually perhaps begin once again to assert some kind of control over their lives. Now, like they could in the era when unions were very strong. But of course, if at this point these measures of austerity are instituted, this will be much more difficult to accomplish. Okay. There's a lot more to go on, but I don't want to do that. What I want to do now is simply just to mention that there's been very troubling data coming about here. Let me see. This is not here. Oh, I have. Oh yes, this is what I wanted to say before this, actually, and this is from this wonderful site, the economic site that I get much of my information from, called Naked Capitalism, and there's this one article about rich grifters, and our wonderful Elon Musk from the Tesla fame and so on fame is a kind of a poster person for this. Actually, he was named Times Person of the Year, and of course, this Senator Elizabeth Warren commented on the tax code in relationship with the CEO, and he said that because here we have someone who has benefited incredibly from government subsidies, without which you would never have been able to actually achieve what. And then he goes and says, "No, I don't pay taxes, etc., etc." This is, and what should I say here? I just mentioned at the end of this article, they say, and what is written, it says, and it's because of the harm that these people cause. We're talking about people like Elon Musk, and the impact that their wealth has on growing inequality, that we must tax the multimillionaires more. Now, this is what is very important for everyone to understand, is that governments we do not need their money, as they say, to pay for public services. We do need is to stop the power they have to destroy well-being in our society. And that is the main reason for taxing extreme wealth. I talked about earlier Jane Mayer's books, especially. The book has to do with the dark money and how you have these cabals of small groups of people who wield unbelievable influence. So again, this is the point that democracy or even representative government is no longer actually functioning in the way that it should. And those words are simply used for people to either feel good or to whatever. Okay. Now, going to climate change, or the disturbing evidence that we have most recently has to do with the rate of melting that we find in both the Arctic and the Antarctic. In the Arctic, what is happening is that glaciers are melting from inside, not so much from the top, let's say, from the outside, but inside, because, of course, the Arctic is actually an ocean. That the water has warmed so considerably. And what you have in the Antarctic is that there's a huge ice shelf. It's called the Thwaites Glacier. And that is also melting in a way that within the next 5 years, it could break apart of that. And the problem that has is that if you take this huge amount of ice, which is inland, and that moves into the oceans, we have a significant rise in the water level. Now, I live in New York, and luckily for me, this little so-called enclave of Washington Heights is on the highest point in Manhattan. As you can sort of see, this is rather high, even though I'm only on the 3rd floor. But a lot of Manhattan is not there, but it's actually very much simply at sea level. And as we saw very much before, when that Hurricane Sandy hit New York, and then even just recently with the big storm that went through, that there are parts of New York which are really subject to flooding very, very easily. And it could be that my little place here be one of the very few places in New York which will not be underwater. So I was thinking that maybe I have to invest in a boat, which I could just put outside my window. Yeah. Anyway, well, that's that. Okay, I have tons more, but I'm not going to talk about that now. There's all this business about what was leading to the January 6th kind of basically sort of riot that way, and how the Trump and his administration was in fact involved in sort of urging this, in fact, to happen. The latest comes from emails which were just released to the public about from people in the circle, Trump circle, sort of pleading with him to say something to actually stop what was happening this way, which of course he didn't do for a long time. Okay, now I move on completely different to what I really would want to do and like to do. And it's something that I'm going to try to do in this YouTube channel. I want to put this somewhere. Let me get this here. Maybe I put it over here. And which is to talk about inspiration, to talk about education, and to actually play, and I cannot play entire pieces, which is a shame, but recordings which were of particular influence to me. And I will start with a couple of observations. First of all, let me put this over here, this way. First of all, there's a lot of talk that's about how it's important not to copy. You don't, because you have to be your own person. You have to. Now, if we go back in time, you see the very old school education, and I speak specifically about musical education, basically involved someone who was the what do you call master, sensei. He's guru, ever, who would play, and the students around would listen and then would copy, would sort of get that way. And somehow, anyway, the individuality of these students came through. So nowadays, we have often this idea that, for instance, if I'm teaching, I should not demonstrate and say, just play like this, and demonstrate, but I should somehow explain. And then the student should have her or his own viewpoint. But the problem is, if you don't already have knowledge, you don't have a viewpoint. And also, the viewpoint comes from something. And it comes from an understanding after, as I would say, imitation. And I've shown this in composition, especially with two pieces. One, Alban Berg's 4 pieces, Opus 5. I did this whole basically series of live streams about this and showing both the innovative methods and how they are anyway rooted in what came before. And then the Stravinsky 3 pieces. And this is, and there I showed how, for instance, the second movement is really based on a very simple tripartite form, which that part is obvious, but tonally is very classical. Right? But we don't see it because it's taken what was in the past, what was in a way copied by Stravinsky, and then from that basis which was copied, something new grew out. We see that in all 3 pieces here. Now in performance, I see the same thing. And I have to say that my own performance has been greatly influenced by little things that I've heard. And that's also when I say that education can be just a moment of inspiration. And that's especially true in the arts. It's true also in science. Because in the arts, you get this kind of education, but one thing here, and that inspires a whole new way of thinking. So I want to do this and show you just a few pieces which really inspired me, performances of this. So I have to go here. This is we're doing this very low tech. I have my coffee in any case. One second. Put this here. And here's this, my little Bluetooth speaker. First things first. Is this not working? It should work. I did so. Okay. I think I don't have. I need first this. this works now. Yes. Okay. So I think this will work. Okay. Now, the first thing I want to play is this wonderful performance of, this is the B major Brahms trio. It's an opus 8. And I'll start with just the very beginning of it and then move to what really inspired me more than anything else. I have to say that have been very fortunate that my father was wonderful. Both my parents were wonderful musicians, and that's a background that I'm so fortunate to have had. But he was also not only that he had very ecumenical tastes and very good tastes, but he exposed me to so many what now would be called historical performances. And they had a big collection of 78 records. I know some of you may actually know what that is. I don't know what's happening back there. Yeah, that's a little better. Closing the door does help. Yes. And this is from the Prod Festival, which still exists, although it's very different from what it was. And this is a performance by Pablo Casals, Myra Hess, and this is Isaac Stern here. And I'm looking at it from 1952. So it's not unbelievably historical, but it is very historical from my point of view. And I found it quite remarkable. Myra Hess, of course, was one of my favorite pianists. And I first experienced her playing from this recording here. So I start with the very beginning, just so you hear the very opening. Let's hope that this works. So it's here. Except we should go to the beginning. Yeah, here we are. Oh, I don't know why I'm... Oh, why is this happening to me? I don't know why this is happening. Oh no. Do you have any idea why this is happening? Autoplay is on. If that take that off maybe, and then it will work. No. Oh. Why is this happening? Always something goes wrong with this.
Happening to me too.
What's that?
I'm watching in Europe, but each time it stops.
Really?
Each 5 seconds, yeah.
Every 5 seconds it
Yeah.
stops
Yeah.
about. Is that the live stream itself?
Live itself.
Oh.
The light stream should be on.
Very bizarre. I tried this earlier and it worked perfectly. Okay, so what I'm going to do is the following. I will record this later and attach this to the live stream, because I don't see how I can otherwise. Settings, let me see. Playback normal. I think that's why this is stopping all the time. I have no idea, but I don't want to spend the time to. So I'm going to take this whole section and record it and post it for everyone, and I will write to you about this. In the meantime, I will just mention the recordings that I wanted to play for you. This is first this really quite remarkable performance I felt, or still feel, with Isaac Stern, Pablo Casals, and Myra Hess of the Opus 8 Brahms Trio, and especially the slow movement, which is what I really wanted to show, Casals playing, and how that influenced me in a very, very definite way. The next thing, let me try this. Let me see if this actually works. Or it's going to be also the same. It's a few things here. Yeah. This is Fritz Kreisler. And it's a 1926 recording with Leo Blech playing the Beethoven Concerto, which is was also a big influence on me, and especially because of two little places. Each one maybe just one measure. Well, so that's what I wanted to play in particular, and how just hearing that one little turn of a phrase can influence a whole musical perspective. And then also just remarkable recording of this live performance of David Oistrakh with his favorite pianist Frida Bauer, and this is from here. This is actually I have it on CD. I have it originally on a long playing record. Oh no, this is Pro Live. This is the second one. Sorry about that. This one. Okay, it's Opus 78, G major Brahms Sonata. With them, just also, and then what was very important for me, and this is the Pro Arte String Quartet, and their performance of the double cello Schubert Quintet in C. So I will speak about these more. Let me try this and see what happens with this, and see if this will work. This is Kreisler, 1926. No, it's happening again. I can't do this now. I can't believe it. This moving to YouTube has turned out actually to be a real problem. I don't understand. My apologies, but I will make it up. As I said, I will record this, post it, and I'm going to post various recordings which actually influenced me, let's say that, on my YouTube channel. Anyway, sorry about this, and if this is stopping also all the time, it's really horrible. So be well, everyone, and I hope to see you again, and hope to get this fixed. I thought we were fixed. Take care.